We're live in 3, 2...
Welcome into Leather Brains, your host here, Slapdawg, and welcome to the end of Week 10. Welcome into Leather Brains. It is, like I said, the end of Week 10, and I am joined here today to discuss everything that happened this last week for both fantasy and NFL purposes with my two very good friends, Scotty Del Rey and Alan Casanova Castro. Gentlemen, your team was on bye this week. How did you fare? How did you survive?
Oh, you want to talk about this right now?
No, well, not like seriously. I just kind of was taking a peek into what you guys did this weekend because
we won the NFL this week.
Okay,
without even playing.
I think we're doing this right now.
Bye weeks. We're not getting into this right now. We'll save it. Save this. Bye weeks are kind of nice. You just turn into full hater. That's all it is. Like you're not celebrating anything. You're just hating on everybody. You're like rooting for teams you don't normally root for. You're just like all over the place, hating on your whole division, your whole conference. That's all it was. So pretty much that's all it was.
Just a hate fest.
Sunday.
Sounds
just
miserable.
Hating.
It's hating goes really well when the hating works, and it did. So we were ecstatic. I was excited watching football all week.
There were some good games, and I'm very obviously we're doing a podcast. We're going to get into that, but so many good games, so many good conversational pieces. There is a lot to discuss today. So everybody who's joined us, welcome aboard. Do me a huge favor. Before we get into the meat of this episode, hit the subscribe button, man. It truly does mean the world. If you are listening on a podcast, YouTube, wherever you're at, hit the follow, hit the subscribe. It means the world to a small podcast such as ourselves. Let's start things out with the MVP of the week.
Yeah, the Leather Brains MVP of the week, which, by the way, is brought to you by Prime Society, luxury leather bags, backpacks, and accessories. So before we get into the MVP, you should join elite athletes like Tyreek Hill and Klay Thompson by checking out primesociety.com and shopping their luxury bags, luggage, and accessories. Whether you're looking for the perfect high-quality Christmas gift that won't break the bank, or you want to turn heads with the swagger of a pro athlete, Prime Society is the answer. Your fantasy MVP helped you secure the bag in your league, so make sure you secure the bag with primesociety.com. Use promo code LBZ20 to get 20% off your order today. Again, LBZ20 to get 20% off your order today at primesociety.com. And now, your Leather Brains MVP of the week is, of course, Keenan Allen. He received 11 balls out of 14 attempts, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, 40.5 PPR points. He's the number 2 wide receiver on the year for fantasy purposes, which, by the way, Yeti and I talked about all offseason, so make sure you tune into Leather Brains to get that information. But Keenan Allen killed it, like usual.
Did you hear him get the receipts out there for that? Did you hear him, Alan?
This is like when he made himself the stud of the week last week.
I was not the stud of the week.
Well, in bipartisan, you made yourself stud of the week. Yeah, you Trojan horsed your way into stud of the week, and you kind of just made yourself the MVP of the week a little bit too. So congratulations to you, I guess, and not Keenan Allen.
Marketing genius. I'm the MVP of the week for several reasons.
Is that what it is? I will admit this. The season is not over yet, but I have been wrong thus far. So you and Yeti were both in the camp that Keenan Allen was going to finish as a top 10 wide receiver, and I was not. And so far, that has been very heavily not in my favor for this. So congratulations to you both, and congratulations to Keenan Allen. MVP of the week, certainly deserves it. He was absolutely electric this last week for both NFL and, of course, fantasy football. So let's kick things off. God, I'm so good at this. With studs and duds. Scotty, take us away.
Yeah, we got to talk about kickers because I threw a little bit of shade last week at kickers when, what's his name, Ogunbowale, is that how you pronounce it? He made that field goal, and I said, anybody can do this. We don't need kickers. And then kickers decided to say, fuck you, Matt. We're going to win 5 games this week, which is an NFL record, by the way. 5 games decided with walk-off field goals. So maybe I'm the dud of the week this week because kickers really stuck it to me.
Damn, they did. And I, honestly, though, I would have preferred Dare Ogunbowale. I killed it right there. I would have preferred him to be the kicker to kick that game-winning field goal. So I was a little disappointed they signed somebody, but kickers were certainly they were kicking. Kickers kick, baby, and that's what they did. Alan, what about you?
my stud of the week, it's like a triple layered stud of the week. First goes to Josh Dobbs. Shout out.
The
Passionate.
Yeah.
Just killing it again, giving a lot of life to the Vikings. I think if you polled the Vikings fans weeks ago, they would have said, it's over, mail it in. Jefferson goes on IR. You got Cousins tearing his Achilles. It's over. So shout out to Dobbs. But really what my stud is a video that's circulated out there. And Josh Dobbs posted it on his TikTok and retweeted it on Twitter. But it was a guy that's singing Creed. He's singing Higher. And it's over this highlight of Joshua Dobbs running into the end zone. And this guy's like, can you take me higher? And I love Creed. Shout out to Creed going on tour.
Shout out to Creed.
But big shout out to Creed.
They're big fans.
Creed. Big Creed fans on this podcast. They are on tour. No joke. But anyways, so my stud is that video. And then Josh Dobbs having the awareness about himself to post it. Just lean into it. He knows people are all over him. He knows he's playing well. So shout out to Josh Dobbs and the guy singing Creed and that video.
Who needs eyebrows, bro?
I mean, I don't. But it was cool. I did see that. Hilarious. And I like how Creed is kind of taking its own form in the NFL. Like, it's like the Vikings and Creed are just like synonymous with each other right now. And I did laugh at that video and I thought it was really, really great. Let's pivot over to Scotty again.
Yep. Dud of the week. This is depressing. Jahan Dotson coming off of 2 awesome weeks. We thought maybe he's climbing back into relevance. And then he puts up a big old fat goose egg this week. And this was a real test for him. I talked about this in the starts of the week, and unfortunately I was completely and totally wrong about that. But Jahan Dotson, with those 2 weeks in a row, a lot of people were saying, okay, maybe it's because there's some other weapons on this team that were out for the last 2 weeks. Jahan Dotson was just filling that role. And I was kind of taking the stance that, okay, they're figuring out what a weapon Jahan Dotson is. So this was a test week because everyone was healthy in the lineup, and Jahan Dotson got 0 catches, which means I am officially off the Jahan Dotson train for the rest of the season.
Wow.
It is unfortunate, but if I've got him, there is no chance I am plugging him in.
I think you stay. This is why people listen to Leatherbrains. Matt will give you Keenan Allen, but then he'll also give you Jahan Dotson, just totally even you out. So you're just like,
there's pros and cons.
Yeah, you never know if you can trust anything I say. That's what I want you to leave here thinking.
You gotta sift through, find the gold.
Does it make you sad? I know that we're doing studs and duds, but like you've been pretty high on Jahan Dotson since preseason, and with a good argument, but it hasn't panned out for him this year. Does this kind of make you a little sad? It makes me sad.
It does make me sad, and it's like salt in the wound when you see how awesome Sam Howell is doing. I mean, he is just out there slinging it. He's leading the league right now in passing yards, and Jahan Dotson's just not benefiting from that at all. And this particular game, Scary Terry also didn't really benefit from it. I think he had like 30 yards receiving, so it was kind of a dud week for him too. But seeing Jahan Dotson get 0 catches, man, given I think Sam Howell threw for over 300 yards, and Brian Robinson was the top receiver on the team, which is it's just devastating. So, I am very sad.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm going to try and brighten the mood up a little bit with my stud of the week, that being Jadea Walker, who is a wide receiver for Texas A&M. This is not an NFL post or conversation, but the reason I bring this up as a stud of the week, if you have not seen the clip yet, I highly suggest you go check it out. He is, I don't know how he's doing it, but he's like moonwalking, or like it looks like he's skating on ice after he gets it. It's part of his touchdown celebration. He's running back to the sideline. Looks like he's skating on ice, but he's wearing cleats on a football field. It was very, very impressive, and I saw that and thought there's nobody else that deserves the stud of the week but Jadea Walker for skating and not walking back to the sideline.
Yeah, if watching NFL football... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Gliding's probably a fair assessment.
I think they call it gliding.
It might be. It looks like he's like almost floating. Yeah, we'll do some more research on that. But I was pleasantly surprised when I saw this. I was like, damn, that's pretty cool. So stud of the week, Jadea Walker, Texas A&M wide receiver, and congrats on the touchdown. Why don't you bring us your dud there, Alan?
My dud was the Ravens. They were going to be my stud because of how they were playing to start that game against the Browns, and then they turned into a freaking dud. So they're my dud of the week on how they finishing. Ravens finishing is my dud, I guess, if you're gonna categorize it. So it's a little tough for them. But yeah, they just totally shit the bed to end that game. They weren't executing. They were throwing picks. It's like I was ready to say this is definitively the best team in the NFL. Like they are playing the absolute best. And to start that game, they look like it. But then it was just like you got to put 2 halves of football together. I mean, this Browns team beat the 49ers. They're definitely capable of doing it. They have the roster to win, and they just let them off the mat. So they were my dud. Second half Ravens were my dud.
Let's just talk. Like, I know that we're going to segue this for just a moment because we don't really have a lot of Browns Ravens conversation teed up for today's show. That game, I think, there's some implications there, right? I mean, obviously the Ravens are looking really, really good this year, but can we write off the Browns? I mean, we know that they have a really good defense, but they were able to get a dub against a very formidable opponent.
Yeah, I think you look at that division overall. Oh, sorry,
I
must have cut out. Did I cut out, Matt?
Yep. Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Great live entertainment. No, I was just going to say, if you look at that division overall, I mean, the Bengals, as hot as they were, they're still in last.
Yeah. No, they are. I mean, the Steelers are above them right now. So, like, this week didn't help, and I know we're going to talk about that quite at length there, but the Ravens, that was a tough loss for them, and I think it showcased that any given Sunday, and I also think more than anything else, it showcased that the Browns are actually a half-decent team.
Yeah, and I think the Ravens have lost, or all the games that they've lost, which I'm looking up what their record is, but all the games that they've lost so far were games where they were leading in the fourth quarter and blew it at the end of the game. Like, this is kind of becoming a thing with them. They really got to learn how to finish. I still think they're one of the best teams in the league, but they've got to learn how to close out games for sure.
I could not agree with you more. My dud of the week is Christian McCaffrey's touchdown streak because it has now been broken. He was going for a 17 or 18 game touchdown streak in every single game that he has played. He was getting close. He towards the end of the game, 49ers were up quite a bit, and they were still feeding Christian McCaffrey. And then it came to be known that Kyle Shanahan was trying to help Christian McCaffrey get that touchdown streak, and he would have broke the NFL record for continuous touchdown streak, which is cool. And it was cool that Kyle Shanahan tried to let him do it, but Christian McCaffrey is a pussy-ass bitch and didn't get it done, and he broke a streak. So he's my dud of the week.
I will say that it's interesting to see from a fantasy perspective, like the difference in coaching, where you look at someone like Arthur Smith, who fantasy managers want to strangle with their bare hands. And then you look at Kyle Shanahan, who's like, I am going to do everything I can to make this man perform for fantasy. And I appreciate that.
Well, I think the other thing to look at too is I don't think it was necessarily fantasy invoked, but he wanted to get Christian McCaffrey that record, which you see some coaches that will do that and you see some that don't. And I think what's really cool is the coaches that do, and especially when it's somebody like Christian McCaffrey, who is a focal point for that offense, you want to get him a record, you want to help him get there, and you also want to keep him happy. So I think it kind of coincides in that way where it's we're gonna try our very best to get you that record because we want you to be happy so we can continue to win games. Also, I just think coaches should try and do that more often because I do think it's cool. Let's move over to the game of the week, gentlemen. We have decided that the game of the week this week is going to be the Texans-Bengals game, very obviously. That game was absolutely electric. I don't think anybody saw the Texans winning this game, and CJ Stroud he seems to be legit. He had another 350-yard passing game, led another game-winning drive against the Bengals, who a lot of people had it as Super Bowl favorites, and maybe that's diminishing. What do you guys think about that with the Bengals? Are the Texans legit? Where do you guys want to start with this? Because there's a lot to unpack.
We can start with talking shit on the Bengals. I can appreciate that. The Bengals are obviously a very good team coming out with a slow start. As we talked about last week, we were saying the Bengals are back, but we still haven't really seen them put it together for a long stretch. And so I still think, Joe Burrow played great. The Bengals had two receivers with over 100 yards. They did all this without T. Higgins. So I still think the Bengals are a solid team, but CJ Stroud is the real story here.
Yeah, I think a few things. So I actually listened to this game, which shout out to those that are like me that like listening to football games. I still think it's a great way to enjoy football. I love just kind of visualizing, and you get all the live feedback from the announcers and not this weird voiceover shit that you get from Greg Olsen or Tony Romo.
You be nice. Tony Romo's a piece of shit, but I do like Greg Olsen.
It's a good voiceover. So I was listening to this game and I thought it was interesting. The Bengals came out right away, first possession, boom, touchdown. You're like, here we go. Bengals are still on fire. Burrow looked good. One thing I will point out from a fantasy perspective that I think is super interesting is the Bengals are making more of a concerted effort to target their tight ends. It started last week with the Bills. It continued this week. I think was it Hudson for the Bengals had 5 receptions in the very first drive. Now their whole offense went cold after that, but there was a very concerted effort to give their tight ends the ball, which I thought was super interesting considered all the other weapons. Now Jamar Chase did end up getting his. I think a lot of that was just because of game flow. They were behind, they had to push the ball, and they started to, and they woke up at the third and fourth quarter finally to like pull to make this a game, because it was, for all intents and purposes, it was over. Like, it shouldn't have even come down to the last field goal. Stroud did throw a late pick, which allowed the Bengals to kind of come back into the game and make it a one possession game like it did. But I was more impressed with the Texans. I'm not as worried about the Bengals. I think the only thing that's interesting for the Bengals is they're in the AFC. They're 5-4. They have a tough stretch still upcoming. They got through the Bills, but it's going to be tough for them to make a playoff push now. But I think this was more of just like a letdown game. They beat down the Bills last week. They were very confident. They felt confident. That first drive felt confident. Then they just kind of let their foot off the gas. I still think they're a super dangerous team. I think the Texans are just like more dangerous now than we had previously thought. And I saw a meme where it was Chiefs fans like watching. It was like a guy smiling watching the Texans beat the Bengals. And then it was a serious face when it was like, oh, wait, we might have to play CJ Stroud and the Texans in the playoffs. So it was kind of like, it was the tale of two things happening all at once. But it was a super interesting game. But I think for fantasy purposes, my takeaway was like how much the Bengals were truly like also featuring their tight ends, which is interesting when you're looking at plugging and playing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and I think there's a couple different narratives that could be spun there. I don't know which one's going to hold the most ground, but T. Higgins was not playing, so you're missing a wide receiver 1B for this team. You have Jamar Chase, of course, but this offense has really, for a large portion of the year, there's been spot games where they've looked great, but overall, this offense hasn't looked incredible. Joe Burrow's health has been a question throughout the entire season, and now like you mentioned, the tight ends are getting more involved. Perhaps that's because like they're not really utilizing. They're trying to throw long balls. Like that's what they have been trying to do all season long. So when you're getting these tight ends involved, they're a shorter route. They're a little bit easier to get the ball into their hands and let your playmakers make plays. Perhaps that's why we're seeing that, is because they really haven't utilized that. They're not running the ball very effectively with Joe Mixon. So what are they going to do? They're going to try and utilize the flats, utilize those quick routes with the tight end. And I think that might be why we're seeing some of that transition to that, which I think is smart for the Bengals, because they didn't have one of their top wide receivers, and their other wide receiver is going to get blanket coverage from the best two DBs. So perhaps that's why I think that probably holds some ground. But the Bengals really are on shaky ground recently. And I mean, you mentioned they have a really, really difficult upcoming schedule. Is there a world in which they miss the playoffs in your mind?
Yeah. I'd say given the AFC North, it is. I don't want to say likely, but it seems likely that they might miss the playoffs. I mean, the Ravens and the Browns they're both legitimate contenders at this point in time. So it's a real tough division. So they got their work cut out for them.
I think Thursday night we find out if they make the playoffs or not. I think if they go into Baltimore Thursday night, they got the Thursday night game. If they can beat Baltimore, I think that's more, the likelihood is way higher now. But I think if they, on a short week, go into Baltimore and struggle again and lose, I think it's pretty bleak. Now, their end of the season, they do get to play the Steelers twice. They get the Vikings. So there is some winnable games in there for them, but they do have to go to Kansas City. They do have the Browns. Divisional games, you just never know. And they have the Jaguars. So it's shaky. Like, I would be a little bit concerned. I think that calf injury, it might come back to haunt them. They're playing really well. I don't think anybody wants to play the Bengals. It's not like they're like, oh, they're not very good. I think it's just, in the NFL, it's hard to win. And if you can't put together a good stretch, if you can't get on top of some of these things early, it becomes very, very difficult, because you don't know who's lurking. Like, I don't think anybody predicted the Ravens necessarily to be as dominant as they are, but their whole division is tough now.
Yeah. Well, let's pivot this conversation over to the other side of the ball here. I know we've kind of talked about the Texans and we've talked about CJ Stroud and his statistics, but let's talk about him in the MVP race very quickly here. Over these last few weeks, CJ Stroud has the NFL world on fire. Rightly so. He's doing incredible. In your eyes, has he now entered a legitimate conversational piece for the MVP race? Because I know SportsCenter and ESPN and all those other places are making that argument. We're leatherbrains and we're a lot better than they are. So let's dig into this. Should he be an MVP candidate?
He 100% should be an MVP candidate. And I think maybe the bigger storyline with this conversation is, does he have Rookie of the Year completely locked up? Like, is there anything he can do to lose Rookie of the Year at this point? And I think he's pretty much got Rookie of the Year locked up, and there is a very good shot if he keeps performing like that. We have to remember this Texans team has been very bad over the last few years. I mean, he's coming out here with rookie weapons and making this team look like they've been in contention for years. So if this continues, I mean, we're only halfway through the season, so there's a lot of time for things to change. But if this continues, there's no way that you can't honestly consider him a legitimate MVP candidate.
I would agree. I think you look at what his touchdown to interception ratio is right now, which is 15-2. He just threw his second interception, like I said, in this game when they were trying to ice it, which good learning moment. But he's protecting the ball. He's pushing the ball. He has 2 games this year where he was under 200 yards passing. One of those was barely, and he threw 2 touchdowns in that game. Other than that, he's been over 200. He threw for 470 last week, 356 this week. He is finding his groove. I think he has to be. I think this is what kind of frustrates me with the NFL. And I'm saying this as a Mahomes Chiefs fan, is that the NFL, the writers, everybody locks into certain narratives that they want to be true. And it's hard to shake them out of that. And I think Stroud is one of those people that could shake that up. And you're going to say, like, wait, he is actually probably the most valuable player. Like, he is, and he has to continue to do this, which I don't know if he can. But as of right now, I think he 100% deserves to be in that conversation. And offensive rookie of the year, like, for sure, 100%. I think he's playing too well. He has this team playing too well.
I tend to, offensive player, a rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year, I think is certainly almost a guaranteed lock at this point, unless, maybe Puka Nacua comes out and breaks the world again. But it's what's crazy to me is that he is a legitimate MVP contender already as a rookie. I don't know how this, in my mental framework, is not very great, so understand that. But I don't know how, I don't get how you can give him that. And the reason being is because you look at someone like Patrick Mahomes. Like, if you took and this is my argument, is I still think Patrick Mahomes is probably the leading MVP candidate in my mind, and that's coming from someone who very clearly is not a Chiefs fan. If you took CJ Stroud and you put him on the Chiefs offense, I actually think that the Chiefs would be a lot worse. And that's not indicative of CJ Stroud's ability. That's indicative of how good Patrick Mahomes is and how bad I think your supporting cast is around Patrick Mahomes. That's my take on it. I still think CJ Stroud should be in that conversation, but I don't know how you look at Patrick Mahomes and the lack of offense around him and say that he still doesn't deserve this. Because if you took Patrick Mahomes and plucked him out of that offense, that is probably the worst offense in the NFL.
I agree. And you have a lot of historical context. And that's what I was saying. It's tough because you have to look at each season in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that because you know about these players. Like, you know how good they can be. You know their propensity. You know where they're going to be. And it's like, if you look at it and you just took this and put it in just one little vacuum and said, how are players playing this year? And you look at what he's doing with this Texans team and what they were projected to do and everything. And so obviously it's a long road. Like, they're not handing out the trophy right now, I don't think. And so if he continues to play at this trajectory and, like, let's say you extrapolate all his stats out in the way they're winning, I think if a lot of these quarterbacks, and this is a theme across the NFL, because, we've talked about it, like Sam Howell and CJ are like 1 and 2 in passing. Was it passer rating or passing yards?
It was passing yards.
Yeah, and you look at what we just talked about, a lot of these offenses are struggling, and I don't think you can really find one offense in the NFL and say, like, hey, they have it figured out. Like, there's no stopping them. You look at Josh Allen, you look at Joe Burrow, you look at Mahomes, you look at Tua. As great as even Tua's playing, like, they've sputtered, and I think it's opened the door for these. I think if any one of those guys actually kick it up at the end, it's not gonna be possible, but for the inconsistencies we see across the NFL, I think Stroud's been one that's like, hey, he's been fairly fucking consistent.
Yeah. And consistently good.
If he ends the season, averaging, right around 300 yards passing, because obviously there were a couple games where he was well below that, but as we've seen over the last couple weeks, he's definitely capable of doing that. We have to start asking ourselves, and this is the kind of the greater context of the MVP conversation. CJ Stroud, if he continues on this route, might be one of the best rookie quarterbacks ever in NFL history. And that's where you start talking about MVP, where you can get that narrative and you can say, he's the best that's ever done it in this position.
Back you up. I'm going to back you up there, Scotty. I have a stat here that I wanted to read on CJ Stroud. So this is from Ian Rappaport. By the way, give shout out where shout outs are due. I did not cultivate this stat myself. I have 2 kids and a job, and I got shit going on.
You have sources, and your sources provided you this stat.
So Ian Rappaport texted me this, as far as you all know, and he said the last time a rookie led the NFL in passing yards per game was in 1939. It was Davey O'Brien.
Who?
CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud. Well, he's got a award named after him. CJ Stroud is leading NFL right now through 9 games at 291.8 yards per game. And if he continues on this path, he could be only the second rookie in NFL history and the first since 1939. So since like sliced bread was invented, he's the only rookie to lead. He could do it, And so what Matt's saying is like the greatest season. Like I don't think people fully realize that. I think it's, hey, he's playing really well. Hey, he's got no, he's playing like light years ahead of a lot of rookies. And I think it's something we got to, pay attention to. So I guess my stud of the year, is me, since Matt gets to do it. I picked him up in a bunch of leagues. I wanted CJ Stroud, so shout out me.
Yeah, big shout out to you.
The other, again, I said it already, but we're talking about him having this, historic season with the Texans, right? He's already got a better record with the Texans than they've had since 2016. This is a team that has been abysmal over the last several years, and he is doing this on the Texans.
They went to the playoffs recently.
Playoffs. So one question for you before we transition to our next topics, because I was watching the game last night and I texted you guys the Justin Herbert. So you're an NFL GM, and I know this is a difficult question because there's a lot of nuance to it and a lot of who's getting support and who's not. You get to start an NFL team right now, and they said you get 2 choices. You can either start with CJ Stroud right now with what you know, or you can start with Justin Herbert. Is that a difficult decision for you at all yet, or are you still taking Herbert night and day, just 100 times out of 100?
I'm taking CJ Stroud.
Okay.
I'm taking CJ Stroud, and the reason being is because you have to pay Justin Herbert now. Like, that's where you're at. And so you got to pay this young man the big bucks. And I'm not saying Justin Herbert's a bad quarterback. I think there's a whole narrative there as far as, is it coaching? Is it him? He's won half the games. He's lost half the games. There's a lot of conversational pieces. But at the end of the day, if I was a GM or a head coach and I was looking for a new home, the Texans are really juicy right now. Not only do they have this quarterback is on a rookie contract. He's balling, and you don't ever get, obviously 1939 was the last time we had a rookie doing that as a quarterback, so yeah, it doesn't happen. And the Texans look good. Like, the Texans are not going to the Super Bowl, but what they're doing is they're installing some narrative into people that you should come here. This is why you should come here. We can build around this guy. We don't have to pay him $400 million like all the other quarterbacks right now. We can do this. And it's kind of, you saw that with Joe Burrow a little bit. Obviously, the situation was different because they were drafting young, talented wide receivers like Higgins and Chase, but you build around him. This is where you look at as a team or a GM, you sit there and you say, This is it. This is the moment where we invest in our team and our quarterback, and you start making those pushes to try and make yourself a contender. And I think that is very, very enticing. What you see on the Chargers side of things is the complete opposite. You see Justin Herbert, who is now going to have to get paid, and that sucks up a lot of cap space. Both of your talented wide receivers are aging assets that struggle to stay healthy. We're seeing it already. Mike Williams is out for the season. Keenan Allen is week to week, typically with some sort of injury that he has. So, and then Austin Eckler, their running back, their star of their offense at this point. What's his future look like? So, the future for the Chargers looks pretty bleak. On top of the fact that Brandon Staley is a freaking goob and probably should not be the head coach there any longer. So, yeah, I think the Texans are in a much more favorable situation, and I'd be taking CJ Stroud for that reason than Justin Herbert.
It's crazy. Think about it. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, you touched on something there, Hunter, that was interesting, where you're comparing him to Joe Burrow and the Bengals and them acquiring those young weapons. And that's exactly what we're seeing out of the Texans right now. With CJ Stroud, you got Tank Dell, you got Noah Brown. Like, these young guys are coming in and lighting the league on fire. I think the comparison to the Bengals makes a lot of sense.
I think in us having this conversation, you can't forget D'Amico Ryans in all of this, and what an outstanding job he has done for this Texans organization. So while we want to sit there and say CJ Stroud for MVP, I'm here for that conversation. I think it's a fair conversation, but I also want to give a big shout out to D'Amico Ryans, because you could be with a subpar coach, and as of right now, he's getting it done with people who nobody expected the Texans to do anything this year. Everybody expected the Texans to be a lackluster team, just like they've always been, and maybe they have their future quarterback. What's even crazier is CJ Stroud was the worst quarterback in this draft. Between the top three, you had Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. CJ Stroud was the one nobody was really super interested in. He didn't test well. That matters right now, doesn't it? Like he didn't test well, so that was one of the things that
so dumb.
Yeah, it's silly. And so he didn't test well was one of the reasons. And then not only did they grab CJ Stroud, but then they traded their first overall pick for this upcoming year to the Cardinals, sold theirs, and then they picked up an offensive lineman as well. So that was a really bold move, and you're like, what the hell are the Texans doing? Very obviously, I think they knew what they were doing. And D'Amico Ryans, you have to tip your hat to him and the success that he's found with this team, because nobody expected this. So
yeah, and just one last
impressed.
piece here before we move on. I know we spent a lot of time on this, but I think we also need to have a conversation about Bryce Young, because he's getting a lot of hate right now. People are saying, oh, look what CJ Stroud is doing. But when you look at the makeup of the Texans offense and these young weapons that they have, Bryce Young doesn't have any of that. Like he is pretty much set up for failure in this season. And I don't think he's necessarily gotten a fair shake. I think it's too early to judge Bryce Young, especially when you compare him to someone like CJ Stroud, who's breaking records left and right and maybe the best rookie quarterback of all time. So I just wanted to throw that out there, tip my hat to Bryce Young and say, hey, just keep chugging, man. I think there's a chance he could find some success later on too.
Perhaps, but the Panthers, they did not set him up for success either.
No.
At all.
Correct.
And their O-line is not great. They traded their only real asset in DJ Moore. Like they haven't really done much to try and help that young man. And I think the unfortunate reality is it's going to be a bleak road ahead for him for a while, because they traded away a lot of draft capital to get him. And so far it hasn't worked out in their favor in that way. So they could have not done that and still potentially had CJ Stroud on a much cheaper alternative. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I feel bad for them. I feel bad for Bryce Young. I don't feel bad for the Panthers. I think it was a boneheaded move, and they very clearly lost that trade. But all right, let's move over and let's talk about the Jaguars for a moment, because we're talking about the AFC South. We're talking about the Texans, and I gotta have a conversation about the Jaguars. Are they not the top contender in the AFC South anymore, is my question to you boys, because they're you look at what they've done. They're currently leading at the moment with 6-3, and they're right in front of the Texans, who are now 5-4. The Jaguars wins. They beat the Colts twice. They beat the Falcons, Saints, and Steelers, but they lost pretty handily to the Texans, 37-17. They got their ass kicked by the 49ers, and they lost to the Chiefs. I think it was 19-7 was the score. So are the Jaguars frauds? Are they trash? Are they not? While they currently are leading the AFC South, do we picture that to change by the end of the season?
I have a couple of things, and I wanted to talk about this with the last one we were talking about, the Texans surgeons, but it's applicable here, obviously, because since we're still in the AFC South. And it's as an NFL fan, you have to be careful thinking your team is just going to get better and better each year. That my team has it figured out. Look at all these weapons we have. We got it. We just have to do this one thing and then we'll be good. The NFL is built so that these teams can rise up and be competitive or have the great players or knock you off your pedestal. And I think very clearly, I think you're seeing that too with this division, where the Jaguars, if you coming in off of last year's performance, won a playoff game, beat the Chargers, coming into this year, like, all right, they're going to put it all together. They got it. They have all the weapons. But what you don't account for is the changing landscape of the teams around you. Nobody ever does. And that's where, like, as an NFL fan, you never know how long your team's going to be in that spotlight, in that light of, hey, we're the best. We got it figured out. You look at the Bills, you look at the Bengals this year. Now, the Bengals have, I feel like they're just injury prone. But even if you look at somebody like the Bills, you're like, okay, is that window closed?
Yeah.
Is that window closing very rapidly for them? And I think for the Jaguars, now you're even in your own division. You're like, oh shit, like I don't even know if we have the best quarterback anymore. And there's one stat I wanted to read to you because I know how much you guys love stats. So CJ Stroud has exceeded 335 passing yards in back-to-back games. Trevor Lawrence has exceeded 335 passing yards just once in his 43-game career.
He needs a haircut. It's that
what's
L'Oreal's
weighing him
getting
down.
all caught up in his helmet. And his hair's all frizzly. I've never been a fan of Sarah Jessica Parker. He's QB 18 on the season for fantasy football, which is a far cry from where everybody had him for fantasy. He was a top 10 quarterback in fantasy football. He was going to lead the league by storm with him and Calvin Ridley, and we haven't seen any of it. Realistically, Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion, has not looked good. And I believe that is the true Trevor Lawrence. I believe we have made excuses for him for a little while. You know, we had his coaching. It's he had the whole coaching misfit where he was getting kicked by his coach and he was bullied and his coach got fired. His coach was hooking up with teens at a bar, like all this other shit that was going on. So it was like, it's not Trevor Lawrence's fault. It's his rookie year. I get that. I understand he was a rookie. You got to figure it out. That takes time. And then we saw last year, Dougie P and him started to click at the end of the season. And they're like, oh, this is exciting. And a lot of Jaguars fans are like, this is what we're going to get. This is here to stay. And it's not. And I don't think Trevor Lawrence is that great. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't think this team, weapons-wise, is bad. I think they have quite a few weapons, and I just don't think Trevor Lawrence is that good of a quarterback. And that's my take on it. That has really always been my take, and I don't think it's going to change.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is really backed up by some of the stats. I mean, even if you look, the Jaguars are the head of the AFC South right now, but when it comes to the points that they've forced, they're actually third in their own division. I mean, their offense is, obviously they've had several games where they're getting, a field goal and a touchdown. Like, there's just not a lot of offensive success there. And I think the Jaguars got to be real concerned looking down at the Texans and even the Colts. The Colts actually lead the division in points forced. The Colts can put up some points, and they look at those teams and they say, oh, I don't know if our offense can keep up with those right now, which is crazy to think about. But it seems like some of the numbers support what you're saying.
So one more quick interjection here. We're going to do a quick little player A, player B. I know you've seen these. Have no graphics for this. So if you're listening, just pretend there's a graphic. If you're watching, pretend there's a graphic. So player A passed for 2,120 yards, 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions with a passer rating of 89.3. Player B, same amount of passing yards, 14 touchdowns to 5 interceptions compared to the 9-6, and a passer rating of 93.7 compared to the 89.3. Player 1 is Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence, 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, player rating of 89.3. Any guesses on who player B is with 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and the pass rating of 93.7?
Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield.
I was going to say that is
Baker Mayfield.
You
so
were
if you're
reading the
looking,
stats and I thought, oh, this is it.
If when you're this is again, this is the
it.
narrative around the NFL, and this is where you kind of get lost in fantasy. You get lost in the name value of some of these guys, and you're like, you write them off, and this is why you always have to you have to constantly be sifting through the data. Like, don't always just go into like what people are feeding you on ESPN, because that's going to be a slippery slope. But you dig into the data and you find out like Baker Mayfield is having like just double the, like, it's not even close to what Trevor Lawrence is doing. But the narrative is the narrative, right? Like, Baker Mayfield is always, he can't win, he can't do this and that. Well, guess what? If you would have Baker Mayfield on your team or Trevor Lawrence, you'd probably be in a much better situation than if you just kept trying to go with Sarah Jessica Parker every week.
I don't think I would. I think he is nothing more than a matchup dependent quarterback, which is fair to say for a lot of quarterbacks at this point. But I don't trust him. I don't trust this team. I think on any given week, it's ETN's team and not Sunshine's. And I think that it's a cloudy future for him, because I'm not buying into the Trevor Lawrence narrative here.
Yeah, especially with the weapons, man. I mean, you can look at quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, who, prototypically you see being the future stars of the league. And you say, their team's just not there yet. They don't have the weapons around him yet for him to really perform. Trevor Lawrence has got weapons, dude. At this point in time, There's not really an excuse. This offense, we even talked about in the preseason, I didn't expect them to go win the Super Bowl or anything, but I expected this offense to be one that should be reckoned with, and it has not turned out that way. And you really do have to put a lot of that blame on Trevor Lawrence, especially after the coaching change. They're kind of out of excuses there in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more.
All right. We got to take a moment to celebrate, gentlemen, because take a deep breath. The Europe games are over. No longer do we have to wake up at 7 a.m. to watch the Patriots score 6 points. It's going to be awesome. Now we just get regular noon and after football, which is so exciting. But I wanted to talk about this game specifically to talk about Mac Jones because he was benched yet again. He's been benched several times throughout his career, but he always claws his way back.
He always gets back in the starting lineup.
Yeah, so is this the final straw? I mean, when they're going down to try and win this game, he has an easy touchdown pass that he just underthrows by like 14 yards, like just not even close to his receiver. And then you see the coaching staff say, well, I don't care that you've played this entire game and Bailey Zappi has taken 0 snaps. We need a drive to go win the game, and we're putting the ball in the hands of Bailey Zappi. That, to me, speaks volumes about the mindset of this organization, and I think we might have seen the last of Mac Jones starting the game.
Did they leave him in Germany, or did he come back?
I think
I don't know. I'll have to reach out to my sources.
I think
German
They might have left them. Also, had I known if like winning World War II, we'd have to go back and show them this crappy football and me wake up at bad times, I would have just been like, let's reconsider all things. Had I known like it was going to end with this, but I think you're right. I think Mac Jones. I mean, everybody. It's one of those. We talk about this all the time. What are these coaches looking at? Like, it's very obviously not the answer. I know they don't have very many other options, but like
that, and I think that's really the problem here is what other options do the Patriots have? Bailey Zappi's still not good. Alan, you and I were in Vegas last year when we watched this whole conundrum unfold for the Patriots where Zappi was in and then Mac Jones was in and then they put Bailey Zappi in. This has been going on for over a year. So this falls on... How
did you not address this?
Thank you. How did you not address it in the offseason? That's what I don't understand. And it's very, very... It's got to be... I'm not a Patriots fan. I will never root for the Patriots. But if you are a Patriots fan, it's got to be very disheartening because this team has zero identity at all. There's nothing. There's no person you can hang your hat on and say, when we need a play, this is the guy we're going to give it to. They have nothing. They have no one. Their team is overall pretty damn mediocre. You have Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott, so take your flavor of the week at running back there. Juju is like the only wide receiver that comes to mind for me, and it's just, and then your quarterback's terrible. So I don't know where they go from here, but I'm not excited for the Patriots, and I don't really see where they go to even make themselves somewhat relevant in the coming years.
So speaking of this identity crisis, I mean, the blame's got to be put on someone. We said a couple episodes ago, Bill Belichick is unfireable. Is that still true? And even if it is still true, what's the over-under that he is the Patriots head coach to start next season?
It's funny that you asked this because I actually made a graphic today that's going to post. This is a little teaser for everybody who's listening or watching, but I made a graphic that's actually going to come out tomorrow about Bill Belichick and his record since Tom Brady has left the organization. And he's under 500, I can tell you that. And I asked the same question because I think that's something that it's almost kind of uncomfortable when you think about it, right? Like, why on God's green earth would the Patriots ever move on from Bill Belichick? And I the only thing that's keeping him secured at all, as far as I can think of, is because of his previous successes. But you know what? That was 3 years ago. Tom Brady hasn't been with the Patriots since 2020, and they haven't been good since Tom Brady's left. They've had a couple competitive years, but overall, they really haven't done a whole lot. I am in the camp that if I was a Patriots fan, I'd be looking towards the future. And that's where I'm at. Because while I want to sit there and say Bill Belichick is a good coach, I think he was a good coach. And I don't think that they're ever going to find, obviously no franchise is probably going to find the success that they had with Tom Brady, but I don't think that they're going to find that with him as a head coach. The Bill Belichick way, you hear that being said often, the Belichick way. You see all these coaches that have gone to other places and tried to implement the Belichick way, and how's that worked out for Josh McDaniels? How's that worked out for any other coach that has gone on and left Bill Belichick? They haven't found success because that's not the way that the NFL works anymore. It might have worked 10 years ago. The NFL's different now. Yeah,
I think there's it's totally nuanced too, and I think if there is a thing that's going to get Belichick fired, it's mainly because of his drafting. Like, his inability to actually draft players. I think there was a 2022 graphic I saw, and there was like 2 players that are even like still on the team of like these 9 guys they had drafted that year. And like, that's what's going to get you fired. Like, if you can't draft, because what you need to be able to sell, and these coaches have to be able to sell, is hope.
Well,
And
he's
if
the
you're
GM too. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but he not only is he the head coach, he is also the GM of the Patriots.
That's what
so
I'm
if anybody
saying.
doesn't know that,
that's what's going to get
wanted
him
to
fired.
blanket that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's going to get him fired. Not necessarily the coaching, because every coach can be like, "Hey, I can only cook with what I got, the ingredients I have," But he's giving himself the ingredients, and those aren't working, and he can't sell hope. Like, what hope do you have? The best players that are, if you're looking at hope for the Patriots, the best players on this Patriots team right now, like in the future, aren't on this team right now. Like, it's somebody else, and so who's going to do that? And do you have faith in Bill Belichick to still do that? I don't know. I think there's going to be a mutual separation at the end of the year. I think he's going to step away, and they're going to be like, cool.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing that comes to mind here is, even if he wasn't the GM, which I think is probably, like you said, the strongest argument for removing him at this point, but even if he wasn't the GM, Bill Belichick could be the greatest coach in the world. The difference, or the key is, we haven't seen it recently, and sometimes an organization just needs to be shaken up. And I think that's where they're at right now, where, maybe it's not his coaching fault, but this organization needs a major shakeup, and that starts with the head coach. So I agree with you. I think he's gone after this year.
Before we transition, one quick thought. There was another coach that went through this similar situation where the organization needed a shakeup.
8 Super Bowls with a quarterback who's 50 years old.
No. Just a shakeup. It was just a shakeup they needed, and it was like a mutual parting of ways. And he went somewhere else and found success, and that was Andy Reid. The Eagles, at the end of his tenure, he couldn't get it done. It was hard to sell hope. He needed a shakeup. He was a good coach. It was just, you just kind of run out of things. Things don't quite work out that way. So even if he is out, I would expect him to land somewhere else. And I mean, I think he could potentially continue
if he wants to. And that's
if he
the other
wants
thing.
to. Yeah.
I mean, I don't.
Sure.
Let me look at how old Bill. He's not a young sprout. And with his kind of
39.
resume,
he's 39.
30, he's 71.
Close.
Like, there's a real chance that he's done with football, and he just becomes maybe somebody you give a phone call to when you need some advice. The old sage sitting on the sideline, but. I think there's a very realistic possibility he retires after this year, or has a mutual parting of ways, and he's done with football. He's 71 years old. Like, he's an older guy. He's not Pete Carroll, but Pete Carroll's still running up and down the sidelines throwing 50-yard balls.
I think Pete Carroll is also 71. I think they're the same age.
Are they? Well, they're definitely not physically the same.
Pete Carroll looks like he's
Pete
about
Carroll
to
could run a
keel
marathon. Bill Belichick looks like he just drank half a bottle of tequila and showed up, and he's just angry and just frustrated, which is understandable looking at this team. But all right, let's Scotty, I'm just going to hand the reins off to you. Go ahead. It's Chiefs talk.
Yeah, Chiefs talk, bro. In the bye week. That's how good the Chiefs are. They're winning the NFL in the bye week. We teased this a little bit at the beginning. Alan, me and you, let's let's
reel someone else in here.
Okay. For lack of a better term, I want to circle jerk with you, Alan, about the Chiefs, like usual. The Kansas City Chiefs are among the biggest winners for the week because look at these other teams in the AFC. Ravens, lost. Bengals, lost. Chargers, lost. Jags, lost. The Chiefs are entering the second half of the season with a top 4 defense and a top 7 offense. So all of this is to say, I know I just wanted to come on here and brag a little bit, but all of this is to say, are the Chiefs in a better position right now than they were at this point in the season last year? And mainly I ask that question because of the defense and because of we know the upside of this offense. We haven't seen it yet. We know the upside. If they are able to make steps in the right direction on offense, now with this new weapons of defense, are they in a better position than they were in 2022, the year they won the Super Bowl?
Well, it's the old Tom Brady method of winning Super Bowls. You just have like a ridiculously good defense and you just hold it together. Even the Super Bowl they won against the Rams, what was it, like 10-3 or some stupid ass thing? Like, it's not like they were lighting it on fire. And so I think if you look at the Chiefs team overall, I think there's a lot of things to love. Still a little bit perplexed by the offense, but the defense being as good as they are, it's really the only reason they're in first. Like, the defense is the reason why. And that's something that Mahomes has never had in his entire career with the Chiefs, is having a super dominant defense that can just go take over. And he doesn't have to go be Superman. He doesn't have to play lights out all the time. And I think that's where, for any team, if you have a super talented quarterback, and I bring up Tom Brady because this is where it's applicable, is if you have a super talented quarterback, he's a Hall of Famer. If he has this really good defense, that's scary because now he doesn't even have to be perfect. And a lot of these guys, they almost have to play perfect. Like Josh Allen, like sometimes has to play
financially,
perfect.
They also have to play perfect because they're demanding such a high. Tom Brady was a little different towards the end because he ended up taking pay cuts to be able to afford the talent. But like, Mahomes ain't cheap. Mahomes is not a cheap quarterback.
But this isn't new. They're in the middle of paying him. And
no, I understand that. But like, that's where I think, and I'm interested to see, and only time will tell. But like, as his career progresses, will it be more Tom Brady-esque, where we'll just suffer through with these half-assed talents that are the Chiefs' wide receiver room, but because we have a decent defense that can keep us competitive and keep us protected, all that Mahomes needs to do is do the little magic every once a quarter, and we win. So like, and I think that's. I don't think that's a trend, but I think it's certainly a possibility for future success. To be honest with you.
Well, and it just goes to show how good of a job the front office has done, because they recognize obviously Mahomes isn't cheap. So what do? You got to draft young players. They focused on the defense. They focused on the offensive line, and this defense is the youngest defense in the league. They are the youngest defense in the league and the number 4 defense in the league. So they obviously drafted really, really well, and that's the key to success. That's what they have to do, especially with this offense, struggling in comparison to years past. But that's enough of that. I'm done.
Well, before we move off that, I want to just very quickly antidotally state that Alan said he wanted no part of this conversation, and the first thing you did was drag Alan into the conversation. So I just wanted to point that out, because in our pre-planning of the show, Alan said, I'm going to watch from the sidelines as you do the Chiefs thing, and then you said, Alan, why don't you come in here and do this Chiefs thing with me? So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. Well, once again, MVP, bro. Marketing genius. I'm never alone.
Also, you got Slaps to talk about the Chiefs even when he said he didn't want to. So, hey, all the way around. Good job.
I did state one thing.
Win, win, win.
I guess.
But let's talk about the Commanders and the Seahawks for a second. There are a couple fantasy relevant things that I think are important to note. First, and this is most obvious, Brian Robinson is just a bell cow. I mean, there's just no doubting it. The beginning of the season, we talked a little bit about, okay, maybe Robinson's obviously going to get the majority of the groundwork, but Gibson could be heavily involved in the passing game, and that's just not happened, because Brian Robinson not only dominated the groundwork, but he also led the team in receiving this week. So he is very involved. He's a good asset to own. But the big question that I have here is Charbonnet for the Seahawks.
Charbs?
The Charbs. We talked before the season, people were kind of concerned about Kenneth Walker and his usage and whether or not Charbonnet would come out here and carve out a significant role. We haven't really seen that, but in the last couple games, he's gotten a handful of touches and he looks good. In this last game, he passed the eye test with flying colors. So now I'm a little bit concerned. Are they going to start working him in? Pete Carroll is known for his meritocracy, where he's like, I don't care what your name is. If you perform on the field, we're going to play you. And you're starting to see in small spurts Charbonnet make an impact right now. So I just want to know, is this something to be concerned about? Or what?
Yeah. Whatever the whole explanation for whatever word you just said. That's
meritocracy?
Meritocracy means rewarding someone based on merit. And so it means that he is showing something
He's
that
so much
makes
smarter
me think,
than us,
hey,
and it's just
damn.
I
think you're overestimating how smart we are and then how smart our listeners are. So
yeah, you can tune into my side podcast where it's just vocabulary talk with Scotty.
Just goes over vocab words.
But answer the question, Slapdawg. Do you think that this is something we need to be concerned with?
I don't want to say concerned, but I agree with you. We talk about the eye test, and that's not an analytical piece that we can sit there and say this or that. We can use stats, but at the end of the day, he does pass the eye test. He looks good. And at the beginning of the year, in pre-draft, and we're talking about Kenneth Walker, he was a guy that everybody was very scared to touch. Rightly so, because they drafted the Charbs, as we're calling him, so early. So that kind of was indicative that they're probably going to use him. They really haven't. He's kind of just been an ancillary piece to this offense that's touched the ball 4 or 5 times a game. And even in this game, he touched the ball 6 times, but he did look good. I'm not expecting him to kind of break the scene right now. I'm not. I think Kenneth Walker is still their bell cow back. If anything, I would like to. I think even Seahawks fans would probably want this guy to get more involved because he does look good. But I wouldn't be starting him in fantasy football. I think he's probably a guy that, if anything, you're gonna throw on your bench. And if Walker gets hurt or we see an uptick, then he might enter the starting conversational piece. But another piece of this Seahawks offense I'd like to talk about very briefly is DK Metcalf. He's been pretty absent, to be honest with you, for fantasy purposes and really for the team. He's seeing a lot of targets these last few weeks, 14, 4, and then 12. So, but he hasn't really done a lot with them for fantasy output. In fact, DK Metcalf's currently wide receiver 37 on the season, and Tyler Lockett is actually the leading wide receiver for the Seahawks offense at wide receiver 24 on the year. So you have JSN, you have Tyler Lockett, and you have DK Metcalf, and it's just become a medley of who the hell do you start this week. I think if you don't own Tyler Lockett, I think maybe you could be looking at benching DK Metcalf or JSN. Is that fair for me to say? What do you guys think?
I definitely bench JSN.
Oh, so I have a good player A, player B for us because I figured this is where this topic would go. It would dovetail into this.
You son of a gun.
Player A, 21 since week 6. So this is since week 6. So just over the last handful of weeks. Player A, 21 receptions, 263 yards, 2 touchdowns. Player B, 18 receptions, 255 yards, 0 touchdowns since week 6. Player A, JSN. Player B, Puka Nuka. So
okay,
but
there's
listen,
a narrative.
But
there.
remember, no, but listen, I talked about this weeks ago where I said everybody's like JSN, he's not doing anything. There's too many mouths to feed. Don't do it. There's nothing going on here. And I think if you look at where this is trending, you just talked about DK Metcalf. What is he doing? His targets look weird. He's not really producing. He's not going anywhere. This is trending. Not saying this is going to be solid, but this is trending. And if you look after week 6, and I know Cooper Kupp came back, and this is not an indictment on Puka. This is not what it is at all.
I'm not even an indictment on Cooper.
No, I was saying on Puka. Like, it's not saying he's playing terribly. Like, obviously, the Rams have other things going on. Stafford being hurt, Cooper Kupp coming back.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other things playing into that. But if you look at those two assets moving on from week 6, and I said JSN is going to be the better asset, and I said that 4 weeks ago, both of you would look me in the eyes and say, you are stupid.
Yeah, but like that's a vacuum. And my argument is Matthew Stafford hasn't been there. And Matthew Stafford was a top tier asset when it came to throwing the ball. Like he wasn't leading the league, but he was certainly in the conversation of top 5 for throwing the ball. Matthew Stafford hasn't been around. He's been hurt. So and that's been very clear for the output of both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. So Matthew Stafford, thankfully, he's coming back this week. He will be playing this week. And I think, I benched Nacua this week. I benched Nacua last week. If Matt Stafford's not playing, I'm not playing Puka Nacua because they're not doing what Matthew Stafford does because Matthew Stafford's not there. So I would still, rest of the season, I'd rather own Puka Nacua than JSN because I think it's a crapshoot every single week. Which Seahawks wide receiver is going to get the 1 to potentially 2 touchdowns that is going to be offered to them? And I'm not willing to take that risk. I think if anybody, it's Tyler Lockett because even if he doesn't get a touchdown, he's the deep ball target and he's going to see some yardage there. So that's how I look at this wide receiver room.
Yeah, and the other piece to this that we're missing with JSN and DK is Geno Smith, who we saw him last season outperform all expectations. And this season, for just using fantasy stats as a measure, he's averaging 14.4 points per game. Right, he's quarterback 18 on the year. He is not performing as consistently as he was last season, and obviously that is limiting the opportunity for these wide receivers. And JSN, to me, is still third in the pecking order in this offense. So you're talking about the third guy in the pecking order on an offense that is inconsistent this season. I'm not excited about it. I'm not starting JSN.
I'll keep track.
From week 6 on, who finishes higher, JSN or Pookie
No, just
Nuki?
from here on. Just no, not even that. I'll just look at the Seattle wide receiver room. We'll see.
Okay, we'll see. And look, I'm not rooting for the kid to do bad. I'm not, but
no, I just think it's trending. I think it's trending in a direction. Like, I hear you. I understand that. I think everybody understood that before we drafted this year. They have 2 really good wide receivers that are mainstay. I just think the teams evolve. You see DK, you see there's just trends, and I would like to see if this trends out to where JSN's usage goes way up.
Well, I think all JSN owners would be hoping for that. What I hoped for this weekend, and it came true. You see this, guys? This is my Cardinals hat. You see the flag back there? I've decided for the rest of the year, every time the Cardinals win, I'm going to hang that flag up on Monday's episode. So we won this week. This was my Super Bowl, gentlemen. This was the week that I was so excited for numerous reasons. Kyler Murray came back. So if anybody did not watch the game, K1 was out there, and he looked healthy. I will say that he made some errors and did not look like the top tier K1 of late, but he looked healthy as far as running the ball. He looked like the ACL was not bothering him in that way, which was great. And I think that for the rest of the season, it's just going to kind of get him back into the groove of things. He hasn't played football in a long time, so it's been almost a year. It's been over a year since he's played football, so I was happy to see it, but what I was even more happy to see was that we beat the Falcons. Excuse me. Fuck you, Arthur Smith. You piece of shit. I'm so glad that we beat you guys. And this was the one game I'm like, please do not lose to Arthur Smith, and we didn't. We won this game in a go-ahead field goal at the very end. So I have to ask you guys the questions. There's a couple questions, but first and foremost, Arthur Smith has kind of been on the hot seat for a couple weeks now. I have my thoughts on Arthur Smith, and I think he's a piece of shit that should get fired right away. But for you guys, as people who don't feel so passionate about that, does Arthur Smith have some real concern? And like, could by the end of the week we see Arthur Smith just lose his job because he just lost to the Cardinals, who are statistically the worst team in the NFL?
It's definitely a concern. I don't know that it will happen, but again, I've been beating this drum all season long. But the Falcons on paper look like they should be so good at football, and obviously the quarterback concerns are a big part of it. But they have so many weapons here, and Arthur Smith just can't seem to figure out how to put it together. And I gave him a lot of grace because this front office didn't address the quarterback concerns. And it's like, okay, that's a very obviously important piece, and you're not allowing all of these weapons to flourish like they otherwise would. But enough games have gone by now, and losing over the last couple of weeks is a huge indictment on Arthur Smith. So I would not be surprised if we see him out of a job in short order.
So here's the thing. The problem is they're in the NFC South. And so if you're looking for Arthur Smith to get fired, the reality of it is they're a game and a half out of first, not looking at tiebreakers. Even though they've lost 3 in a row, they've lost 3 in a row. They're still only like a game and a half out. Their end of the schedule, which doesn't look too terrible on paper, because they get the Saints twice, they get the Colts, they get the Buccaneers, they get the Panthers, they get the Bears, they get the Jets. Those are all games that could go either way. Like, they could figure out and stumble their way into winning a good number of those games. And some of those obviously have direct divisional implications. They could actually win this division. Not saying they're going to.
Okay, but
do you fire a guy that stumbles his way into winning the division, or do you say long term? I don't think yet, because they still have an opportunity in front of them to win their division.
If they go to the playoffs, does Arthur Smith get fired in the offseason?
I don't think you can.
If they don't go to the playoffs, does Arthur Smith get fired at the end of the season?
I think the chances are shoot up astronomically. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I think you're just waiting. I think if you're anti Arthur Smith fan like yourself, we've joked it's the Arthur Smith Bowl every week. So who gets to play in it? Next, the Saints get to play in the Arthur Smith Bowl. You don't want to lose to Arthur Smith. If they have to keep losing, but right now they're in such a shitty division overall that they have the opportunity to still win it. So it
makes me sad. Like, it makes me so sad for Falcons fans too, because I know Falcons fans fucking hate this guy. I think most people hate this guy because he's just like he reminds me of a janitor that just walked his way into being a head coach. Like, he just kept finding opportunities, was just given opportunities, and this is where it's gotten him. But he just doesn't even have the grace or understanding to know that he shouldn't be there. He thinks that he deserves to be there, and he doesn't. He's a terrible fucking head coach. He's an idiot, and I have no respect for him, and I want him to get fired. Now, I will say this. He did use Bijan Robinson. This was the Bijan Robinson breakout game. So while I'm sitting here and the hatred flows through my brains for this incompetent moron. He finally used Bijan Robinson a little bit this week, and I think a lot of people were really happy about that. He went 22 for 95 and a touchdown, was also involved in the passing game, and congratulations. You found out that you had the best running back in the draft this last year. You didn't really use him, and this is the first game that he actually saw a decent amount of touches. So I still think he's a piece of shit. I still think he only has 4 brain cells, but he managed to use one of those brain cells to use his running back effectively.
But and he put him in on punt returns. He put Bijan on punt returns. Like, why? Whatever. I guess he's getting the ball. Yeah, they put him in for punt returns. He only had 1 for 8 yards, but like, it's like he's confused. Like, seriously, somebody needs to sit him down with a copy of Madden. I'm happy to do this for Arthur Smith. I'm happy to sit him down with a copy of Madden. I will explain to him how offenses work. I don't know if he knows. I will explain to him how plays work and how you set plays up and how you get guys lathered up in the game. Like, I will walk him through that if that will help him, because right now, like, it still seems off. Like, yes, he kind of figured it out, but we'll see if he can do it next week. But can we please take Robinson off of punt returns?
Well, and to add more fuel to the fire, he was quoted just recently saying that Tyler Algier is maybe one of the best short yardage backs in the game. And then someone went and pulled the stats of short yardage plays between Algier and Robinson Robinson far outperformed Algier in terms of efficiency. So he's saying these things that have no basis in reality at all, which, of course, is par for the course.
You didn't let him finish. He said Algier is one of the best, but Bijan Robinson is better. Like, he didn't continue.
They just cut the clip off.
Yeah, they just cut it off.
It was like he was going to keep going. He was going to list everybody in the NFL who is best. That's all he was doing.
All right, well, I think for the rest of the season, we're going to be on Arthur Smith burn at the stake watch, because that's where he deserves to be. I hate that man. I think he is a complete joke, and I want to do nothing more than just fucking hold him by his neck and take an electric razor and shave that stupid-looking fucking mustache right off his face, because he doesn't even wear it well.
He did shave his mustache, and then he let it immediately grow back. There was
but it looks like stubbly, nasty mustache. Like, you either do it or you don't, bro.
He's confused even about facial hair. He doesn't know what he needs to do.
That's the worst when you shave and you're in the in-between stage. If you're like growing it out, like, you almost need to wear a sign that says, like, I'm growing this out, like, work in progress, because otherwise it looks super rapey.
No, that's what he looks like. I hate that man. All right.
Arthur Smith is rapey.
Title of the episode.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. As much as I hate Arthur Smith, I just think he's the worst. A man I love. His name is Sir Daniel Campbell. I think he should be knighted by the Queen or the Pope or whoever does the knighting. He should deserve to be knighted, and I love him. And somebody has come here today. Somebody who I never thought would come here to the podium today for an apology. So I will leave you with that. Whoever would like to step up and apologize, now is your time.
Alan, you got any apologies to make?
No, I don't freaking fold under pressure. You stand strong. You talk shit until it's... One of my greatest attributes is I will argue something even if I know I'm wrong. I will just keep going because I have the wherewithal in me.
Attributes?
Yes, I will fight.
Being
and I will
stubborn
argue.
Is the greatest attribute.
I just told you in college I got banned from ESPN message boards because I was arguing something. I don't even remember what it was. It was for like some random college football team. So I'm just more upset that you're folding. But go ahead.
Well, it might make you feel a little bit better to know that I framed it as an apology for comedic purposes. I still think Dan Campbell. I mean, I'm going to talk about one game, and Dan Campbell has a long history of pissing me off. But in this one game, Dan Campbell did impress me. I admit it. And the reason for that is because all of my concerns for Dan Campbell, almost all of my concerns for Dan Campbell, were addressed in this game. I think this was his best coach game of his career, bar none. And starting with Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously fantasy managers all over the place have been dealing with this frustration of Jahmyr Gibbs looking like such an explosive back and being limited in his usage. Montgomery has made that conversation more difficult because he's also been very, very efficient, so they've used him well. But in this game, Jahmyr Gibbs finally led the backfield in touches, right? He was utilized on the ground, he was utilized through the air, and as a result, both Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery had great days, and they made this offense look awesome. And I think that that's a key there. You want to have this change of pace where you're saying to the defense, hey, we've got two running backs who could both kick your ass, and you never know which one's going to come out of the huddle. And I think they needed that mentality to start the season, and now they're finally getting into it. So congratulations for finally coming around on that to Dan Campbell. I appreciate that. Maybe the biggest thing that could impress you about Dan Campbell is the way that he has Jared Goff playing football. That's a fair thing to say. Jared Goff is playing the best football of his career right now, and you have to attribute that at least in part to coaching. Right, he's played for several coaches. You've never seen him play like this. So I think Dan Campbell does deserve some credit for that. And another big thing that I've always criticized Dan Campbell for is his risk assessment, because he goes for it on fourth down a ton, but it seems like in the games, like there are some situations where like, oh, it's Dan Campbell. Of course he's going to go for it on fourth down. And they punt the ball at like the 50-yard line. And then there are some games where they're going for it on fourth down, like inside of their own 20-yard line, just for fun. I don't know why. In this game, Dan Campbell made all of the right decisions on fourth down. They got a couple fourth down conversions. They were the right calls. He was consistent with his aggressiveness, which is something that I think has been lacking. And of course, not that I know of anyway, but I never saw him cry. So that's a good, that's a plus in his direction, because he does cry a lot. I don't think he cried this last week, so that's good. So again, this is the best coaching job of his career. I'm an honest man. I've said a lot of bad things about Dan Campbell. I think he deserves some credit in this one.
I still didn't hear an apology. Maybe I'm sorry for the way I've treated you, and hopefully we can mend this relationship moving forward.
Nah, you're cutting out.
Okay,
I don't know.
Hold on.
What?
So I just ask you one question. We can move on from this. We can move on.
I don't want to.
Why an apology? No, why an apology now when they beat a 4-4, a 500 football team with a bad defense, and they had to win on a walk-off field goal, which is fine. They won. A win's a win. But why is this the better one and not the week one in Arrowhead? Like, and not
that's because you're a Chiefs fan.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, not saying he didn't have a good game, but I feel like I would say the week one win in Kansas City was a better coaching job than
the week one win in Kansas City was a gift handed to him by all of Kansas City's pass catchers.
See,
and we all know that. And in fact, there's tape of even Hunter saying that the Chiefs handed that game away. And that's, again, not to take anything away. They did enough to win, which is that's what matters. But this game, it has nothing to do with who they play. It has everything to do with Dan Campbell's performance as a head coach. And I think, the combination of making the right calls on fourth down, the combination of playing Jahmyr Gibbs the way that he's supposed to be played, and the long-term implications of Jared Goff playing his best football, I think all of those culminate into he deserves a congratulations on this one.
Thank you. As Dan Campbell's his left-hand man that he doesn't know I'm there for, I do want to say, as his biggest supporter and his jerker, that's my title, is the jerker. I just jerk him. I appreciate that. I will say this, and then Alan, I want your question. I don't think you can ignore the Jared Goff piece, because that is truly something that is very interesting and honestly kind of incredible. Jared Goff has been very lackluster most of his career. The Rams, in fact, traded Jared Goff to the Lions, and they got Matt Stafford. So they did this trade. Matt Stafford obviously took them to the Super Bowl, but like there is a possibility, and I don't think the Lions are quite there yet, but they're definitely in playoff conversation. Like they're a playoff contending team, and any given Sunday, who knows what the hell's going to happen. But for Jared Goff to go in there and then once again find new life as a quarterback, he's playing really well. I have to tip my hat to him, and I am impressed with what the juice they've been able to squeeze out of Jared Goff.
Quick question for you. Now I'm going to read. I'll read the schedules here in a second. Do you think the Lions get the 1 seed in the NFC? And now let me read you the schedules. Here's the Lions' upcoming schedule.
I'm going to say
Packers,
yes.
Saints, Bears. So here, I'll start over. Bears, Packers, Saints, Bears, Broncos, Vikings, Cowboys, Vikings again. Whereas the Eagles, they have the Chiefs coming up on Monday Night Football. I'll be at that game. Shout out me, stud of the week. Chiefs, Bills, 49ers, Cowboys, Seahawks. And then they end it with the gauntlet of Giants, Cardinals, Giants. So if they can get through that little stretch and yeah, I was joking. But if you look at those two schedules, like that's I mean, that's quite opposites. I think if the Lions can just keep their shit together and not have a Ravens episode that they had, I think they have a very real shot of grabbing the 1 seed just by sheer strength of schedule at this point. But I want your guys' thoughts.
I know, I agree with you completely. And I think that the important thing to note is they can't lose their glue. They need to stick together and continue to do what has worked for them and win these games. Chargers are not a good team. We know that. We know that they, on paper, have a very good team, but they continuously fail and their defense is very bad. So I'm glad they came out with the win. As the pseudo Lions fan this year, I was very excited for that to continue their success, and I think that there is certainly a very realistic possibility that they could be the NFC. They could take the NFC North, which would be super cool. Like, when's the last time the Lions have been good? So I'm rooting for it. I really want that to happen, and then Dan Campbell's going to promote me, and I won't be the jerker anymore. So I'm really rooting for that.
Nice.
Yeah. Let's do the mailbag segment, waiver wire, and get the hell out of here. So let's do the mail.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me wanna wag my tail. When it comes, I wanna wail. Mail!
We got one question this week, gentlemen, and it is from Chris Bork. I believe I said that right. Sorry if I didn't. Said, I'm winning by 45 points in fantasy. My opponent has Jerry Jeudy, Javonte Williams, and Gabe Davis. How are my odds looking? I'm going to say everybody who's listening to this in the podcast tomorrow, you already know the answer. But we don't because it hasn't happened yet. I'm going to say your odds are pretty good. Jerry Jeudy, bust. Javonte is starting to find some life. And Gabe Davis, you just take a coin and you flip it, and you hope to God that it lands on tails and he doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I
you
think
have to pray for a defensive struggle.
Yeah, I'd give you a 75% chance of winning. I mean, even if Jerry Jeudy and Gabe Davis both find the end zone, you're still talking about they're likely going to put up 10 to 13 points. So I mean, someone's going to have to really go off for them to put you over 45. So I think you're sitting pretty.
Yeah, Gabe Davis, he's probably the one I'd be most scared of, because you never know what you're going to get out of Gabe Davis. Waiver wires. Let's just do this thing real quick. Scotty, I will let you lead the charge here.
Yeah, I want to come with kind of a gross one, but with all the quarterback injuries going on, obviously quarterbacks have been kind of a hot commodity on the waiver wire, trying to pick guys up and keep your lineup intact. I was looking at some stats, and I think people should be picking up Derek Carr. He's only 29% owned. Let me tell you this. Between weeks 5 and 9, he was a top 10 quarterback, top 10 fantasy quarterback, which is kind of surprising because it doesn't really look like it on the field necessarily, but he's playing relatively well. And I think he would have had a relatively big game this week if he didn't leave with an injury early. But the big reason for this is, he's playing pretty decent, but their schedule to end the season and going into the fantasy playoffs is solid. They're going to play the Lions, the Falcons, and the Bucs. The Lions are the 7th worst team against opposing quarterbacks. The Falcons are the 3rd worst team against opposing quarterbacks, and the Bucs are the 4th worst team against opposing quarterbacks. So Derek Carr is going to have some opportunities to make some waves. If you're struggling at quarterback, I'm picking him up and adding him to the roster.
Yeah, and the quarterback position has been a crapshoot this year, so I think it's a pretty safe thing to say to go get Derek Carr, and I didn't ever think I'd say that, but for fantasy, he definitely could get it done for you. I brought Ty Chandler, running back for the Vikings. Alexander Madison left the game with a concussion, and the running back room for the Vikings is looking pretty bleak. The reason I bring up Ty Chandler is this. Typically, players do not return within the same week that they have a concussion. The only people who do are people who are quarterbacks, because I believe that the NFL rushes them back because they don't want to play without their quarterbacks. But any other position, if they get a concussion, they usually miss the following game, and that's exactly what happened or is happening to Alexander Madison. The reason I bring up Ty Chandler is because I think he is an ancillary fill-in for this upcoming week, who I would be very interested in starting. The Vikings play Denver this upcoming week, who is dead last against the run. Ty Chandler's only 15% rostered. I would be looking to grab him if at all possible. And I brought in one other running back to the table, and that being Devin Singletary. Singletary saw a career 30 touches this last week for 150 yards and a touchdown. I get that this is a split backfield between him and Dameon Pierce, but Dameon Pierce has been ruled out these last 2 weeks, and Singletary is getting a majority of the looks. If Dameon Pierce does not play again this week, Devin Singletary, especially with the way this offense has been clicking, is somebody that I would potentially be starting as an RB2 if needed. He's 54% rostered. I would not hate grabbing him if you are looking for a running back.
And I brought one. We talked about him earlier. That is Sir Noah Brown. He's about 30% owned across all the leagues. The real main reason I brought him, not for like super longevity, because a lot of it is target share based. But if you look at his upcoming schedule, he's obviously jiving with CJ Stroud, but they get the Cardinals, the Jaguars, and the Broncos coming up. And you don't know what state the Broncos are going to be in. If Stroud keeps playing like he is, I could see the possibilities of Brown continuing to be that number one for him, the trend of yards that he's getting. So if you're looking for some solidarity in your patchwork flex position, as a lot of us are, and you're sifting through, I think Noah Brown could be a good ad for you this week if you're unsure.
I'm going to bring one more. This was ad-libbed, and Alan's going to laugh hysterically at me, but Michael Wilson, wide receiver for the Cardinals. If you're in deeper leagues, go grab him, because he out-targeted Hollywood this last week. Kyler Murray is back, and Kyler Murray threw the ball 32 times, so is an ancillary piece to sit on your bench, and it's either him or Rondale Moore could be the wide receiver too for this team.
Just the Cardinals segment, bro. I'm not allowed to talk about the Chiefs, but we got to talk about Cardinals players every fucking week.
They're just on the waivers because we're bad. But Kyler Murray is back, and if they throw the ball 32 times a game, somebody's going to have to catch it. So
I don't know if we properly praised how awesome Kyler Murray looked. And like, you expected some rust, but that dude looked like he was ready to kill it.
He did. I honest to God, I was in the camp as a Cardinals fan. I wanted to sell Kyler Murray. I wanted to be done with this whole bullshit, like him playing Call of Duty in the wee hours of the morning. I was tired of the attitude. I was tired of everything. But I think, and I don't know this, and this is just me I could be making all this up, but I think there's some fire under this young man. And I think like him being hurt and seeing all these fans just out on him and being like, fuck him, move on. Like he wants to come out and prove something. And so I'm back in on Kyler Murray. I'm back in. I don't have a choice as a Cardinals fan. Like what else am I supposed to do here? So I'm going to ride Kyler Murray. I'm going to support him and I'm going to root for him. And I'm going to root that we keep him around. And then we get Marvin Harrison Jr. as our wide receiver one in this upcoming draft. Because we still have a pretty favorable top 5 realistic chance for pick this upcoming year. And we also have the Texans first round pick. So we're going to make some moves. And I'm all in on Kyler Murray. Who do you guys think is going to win in tonight's game? Broncos, Bills. I think we were wrong last week. I don't remember what the game was, but
I was correct.
I think Matt was right.
I was wrong.
I was wrong. Yeah.
It was trending that way though because Herbert didn't do anything. Like that Chargers offense really didn't do anything. It was just the Jets, again, an inability to score points, which is important in football.
I'm going to take the Bills. Dibs.
What about you, Alan?
Give me the Bills. They're pissed off.
Yep, I'm riding with you this week. I'm going with the Bills as well.
I hope Sean Payton, I hate him too. There's some coaches I really despise, and Sean Payton's another one. So I think Sean Payton's a scumbag piece of shit. I don't think Arthur Smith is a scumbag. I think he's too stupid to know what that word is. So, but I think Sean Payton knows what it is, and I think he's a scumbag. And that's it. That's all the time we have. Hey, everybody, appreciate you joining us here at Leather Brains. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, if you could hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching us, whether it be YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, wherever, or TikTok, we're everywhere. Go check us out. Hit the subscribe button. Takes you 30 seconds and means the world to a small podcast such as ourselves. I appreciate all of you guys listening to us, and I appreciate you gentlemen for doing this with me. We'll do it again next Monday, except for Alan, who will be at the Eagles-Chiefs game, so enjoy your time there, my friend. You will have the some social logins, so we expect to see some pictures from all the Leather Brains want to see some Monday night action, because that's going to be a good game.
I got a task for you. I got some homework for you since you're going to the game. I think Chiefs fans and Eagles fans have this weird relationship where you kind of expect us to hate each other given the fact that we just played in a Super Bowl. But I think the Kelsey brothers have brought our fan bases together. Oh, wow. And I'm interested to see how they feel about the Chiefs as an organization. So if you find some Eagles fans, maybe ask them, hey, does the brotherly love bring us together as franchises?
Not the brotherly shove. Don't ask them that, because they'll be like, you want me to shove you?
We are, well, they might. Well, 2 people that we're taking with us are big Eagles fans, and I can wholeheartedly say that what you're saying is true, Scotty. They do not have any ill will. It's more of this thing of like, we know we're dominant. We're 2 dominant teams, and we have fun doing it. So I think it's in the same boat.
As a Chiefs fan, I started this season. I said, obviously, I want the Chiefs to win it all. But if they don't, I think I'm rooting for the Eagles. I would really like that Eagles team to get a win. And I think that is kind of a mutual feeling between the two fan bases. It's a love fest.
I'll report back.
I think both fan bases are toxic. So just going to throw that out there.
Coming from a
that's
loser, that's not
also
surprising.
a common thread. That's a common thread. We know everybody hates us, and that's what both fan bases know.
I don't hate you guys. I think I hate Chiefs fans more than I hate the Chiefs as a team. Because, like, genuinely, I do like the Chiefs team, but I think the majority of Chiefs fans are unbearable. So it makes me not like the Chiefs
winning.
as much. No, it's not it. It's the attitudes that
it.
you bring, such as that one. All right, that's it. That's all the time we got. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. We
are
out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out leatherbrains.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.